Chapter 1, Truck Kun, the world had ended. The thought drifted through Alaric's mind, quiet and final, as he gazed across the ruin of the battlefield. The sky, once a brilliant azure, was now choked with crimson miasma, the sun blotted out by the wings of invading demons. Below, the vibrant seas had churned into a thick sludge of blood, the waves crashing against shorelines of shattered bone. It wasn't just here. The destruction stretched to the horizon. In the far north, the world tree, the pillar of life itself, lay severed. Its sacred leaves, which once healed nations, were now nothing but ash drifting in the wind. The elven forests were a graveyard of cinders. To the south, the gears of the dwarven kingdom had stopped turning. Their mighty mechanical guardians, the pride of engineering, lay as twisted heaps of scrap metal, silent against the tide of destruction. East and west were no better. The human kingdoms were decimated, their cities flattened. The land of dragons was silent, save for the mournful cry of the last worm mourning its ancestors. Cough, cough. "O hero," a raspy, mocking voice broke the silence. "The world is already lost. Why do you still fight?" The voice came from a creature lying a few meters away, or rather, half a creature. Azazel, the demon king of destruction. The being who had slaughtered the 7 dragon ancestors and driven the gods from the heavens. Now, he was missing his lower half, his obsidian armor shattered, and one of his magnificent horns snapped like a twig. Could it be? Azazel wheezed, blood bubbling from his lips. Because of some rancid title given to you by the gods. Or did you forget that those same gods are the ones who abandoned you? Alaric Ironheart, the hero of prophecy, forced a smile onto his blood-stained face. He tried to move his arm, but it was gone. His mithril armor, plated with dragon scales, was ruined. His once luscious black hair was matted with gore, and the light in his eyes was fading fast. "Why do I fight?" Alaric whispered, the metallic taste of iron filling his mouth. "You're a demon, Azazel. You wouldn't understand." He looked at the demon king. Despite the ruin of his body, Alaric's eyes burned with a final, defiant light. "You underestimate the people of Elias. We may have suffered millions of deaths, but make no mistake, we have won." Azazel's eyes widened slightly. "One, look around you, fool." "The gate," Alaric rasped. "The gate to the demon realm has been closed. All your generals are dead. Your armies are leaderless." He coughed, a violent spasm that racked his broken body, but his smile didn't falter. "And you, the leader of demons, you will meet your end here with me." Alaric took a deep, shuddering breath. With enough time, the survivors hidden in the cracks of this world will heal. They will learn, and they will come back stronger. Because of that simple reason, I fought. The wind howled over the battlefield, carrying the screams of the dying. Alaric's vision began to tunnel. He knew he had seconds left. His mana heart was shattered. His soul was leaking away. "As a hero," Alaric whispered to the darkening sky, "I only have 3 regrets. 1, that I could not save more people. 2, that I could not marry the love of my life, Elena. And 3, his eyes hardened, that I could not ask the goddess why. Why did she abandon us?" Silence fell over the battlefield. Azazel stared at his adversary. He saw the conviction in the human's eyes. He saw a will that even the destruction of the world couldn't break. For the first time in eons, the demon king laughed. "Ha ha ha, all right then, hero. If there is a next life for monsters like us, let us meet again. Only next time I will win." Alaric chuckled, his breath failing. "If there is a next life, just know this, Azazel, I'll be there to stop you again." Their eyes met one last time. Then the light faded. The hero and the demon king died together, their blood mixing in the soil of a dead world. The story of Elias was over. Ugh. Blue Star Earth. Stupid author, how could you end it like this? The shout echoed down the busy street, turning heads. Lin Ye, an 18-year-old student with unkempt black hair and a slightly overweight physique, stood on the sidewalk, staring at his phone screen in utter disbelief. His knuckles were white as he gripped the device. He had just finished the final chapter of his favorite web novel, The Hero Returns. "What kind of trash ending is this?" Lin Ye raged, scrolling through the comments section furiously. "Everyone died, the hero died, the Demon King died. What was the point?" He began to type a furious comment, his thumbs moving like lightning. "What about my waifus? What about Elena, my lovely angel? What about the Elf Queen? What about the Master of the Flame Tower? You just killed them all off-screen." He was hyperventilating. He had spent 3 years reading this book. He had invested money, time, and emotion into these characters. "And you, Demon King," Lin Ye shouted at the screen. "If you wanted to destroy the world, why did you fail at the very end? You killed the gods, you had everything. If it were me, I'd either save the world properly or rule it. I wouldn't die like some noble idiot." He was so engrossed in his rage that he stepped off the curb without looking. "You there, move!" A shout from a bystander broke his trance. Lin Ye looked up. Blinding headlights filled his vision. A massive truck was swerving unsteadily, barreling straight toward him. Honk! He didn't even have time to scream. Bang! The world spun. A crushing impact shattered his ribs and sent him flying. He hit the asphalt hard, his phone skittering away across the road. Pain. Blinding, white-hot pain shot through his body, followed immediately by a terrifying numbness. His vision blurred. The sounds of the city, the honking cars, the screaming pedestrians, faded into a dull roar. Darkness encroached from the edges of his sight. As his consciousness faded, Lin Ye had only one final burning thought. "Screw you, author. And screw your shitty book, too." Chapter 2, System and New World Elias. A world woven from the wildest dreams of fantasy lovers. In the sky, constellations weren't just stars. They were gods watching over their domains. In the south, dwarves drank ale while forging weapons that could shatter mountains. In the north, beautiful elves sang to the world tree, their voices carrying the weight of thousands of years of history. And among the humans, kingdoms rose and fell, heroes were born, and adventurers carved their names into legend. It was a vibrant, colorful world. But beneath the joy, a cancer was growing. A vast, encroaching darkness was slowly enveloping everything. In less than 25 years, the gates to the abyss would open. Demons from beyond the world would pour in, eliminating 90% of all life on Elias. This apocalypse wasn't just bad luck. It was orchestrated. Traitors from within the great empires would open the gates, defecting to the demons for power in the chaos. And I, Damien Voss, am the one who holds the key to the end of the world. Sigh. Of all the people in the world to be reincarnated as, why did it have to be this asshole? Lying on his back in a plush wooden crib, a baby barely a week old wore an expression far too mature for his age. He had tufts of short, silvery white hair and sky-blue eyes that shone with intelligence. His chubby arms were folded across his chest, and his brow was furrowed in deep thought. Damn stupid author, why did it have to be this damn book? Lin Ye, now Damien Voss, cursed internally as he sorted through his memories. It had been a week since the truck accident, a week since his death and subsequent rebirth as the first son of the Voss household. From the whispers of the maids and the conversations of his new parents, he had confirmed his worst fears. He was inside the world of The Hero Returns, a tragic fantasy novel destined for absolute destruction. In the original plot, there was no happy ending. The protagonist fought bravely, but he didn't survive. He died, dragging the Demon King down with him, watching his lover and friends perish one by one. It was a tragedy written in blood. And in some twisted play on fate, Lin Ye had not only reincarnated into this doomed world, but he had reincarnated as someone set to die before the final battle even began. And at the hands of the protagonist, no less. Clutching his baby-sized head in dismay, Damien reflected on the grim reality of his new identity. Damien Voss, heir to the House of Voss. The Voss family wasn't just any noble house. They were a lineage of dark mages known as the Shadow of the Empire. A family with enough wealth to buy kingdoms and enough magical might to level them. His father, Thuron Voss, was an Eighth-Order mage, a being capable of erasing cities with a wave of his hand. His mother, Elizabeth, was a Sixth-Order mage in her own right, feared for her illusions. Anyone who hears this would think I hit the jackpot, Damien thought bitterly. Rich, powerful, talented parents. It sounds like a dream start. But what they don't know is that the Voss family is one of the biggest death traps in the entire novel. Thinking about the cruelty of the author, Damien unknowingly clenched his toothless gums, squeezing his tiny fists. The Voss family was doomed. In the original story, they would be branded as traitors. A conspiracy led by the Second Prince, a man hungry for the throne, would frame them for crimes they didn't commit. The Empire, fearful of the Shadow's power, would turn on them. Damien would watch his family members be captured, tortured, and executed one by one. Slandered by the world he was born into, filled with despair, the original Damien would eventually turn to the abyss. He would contact the demons for revenge. He would become the fourth demon general, the king of 10,000 monsters, a madman who lived only to slaughter humanity. And in the end, he would be cut down by the protagonist's party as a mid-game boss, a stepping stone, trash. Screw that, Damien thought, his blue eyes burning. He remembered his final vow before the truck hit him. If it were me, I'd either save the world properly or rule it. No way in hell would I die like some noble idiot sacrificing himself. He wasn't going to follow the script. He wasn't going to let his family die. He wasn't going to let the Second Prince win. He needed to become stronger, stronger than the protagonist, stronger than the Demon King. No, not just him. If he wanted to survive the Succession War and the demon invasion, the entire Voss family had to get stronger. Thankfully, Damien smirked, his baby face looking oddly cunning. I didn't come to this world empty-handed. With my knowledge of the future and that thing, I should be able to achieve both. His pupils dilated with excitement. He whispered a word he had tested many times this week. System open. Ding! A translucent blue screen materialized in the air above his crib. Name Damien Voss. Age 1 week. Realm none. Affiliation Voss household. Innate abilities contract gem unawakened, dark magic affinity aura affinity. Skills basic identification, high-level crying, high-level milk sucking. DP 100. Damien scanned the interface. During his week of infancy, he had figured out the basics. First, the system wasn't sentient. It was a tool, a computer program that fed information directly into his mind. Second, and most importantly, was DP destiny points. DP was the currency of miracles. It could be used to pull for random innate abilities, directly improve his cultivation realm, heal fatal injuries, or even upgrade skill levels instantly. As long as he had enough DP, he could turn a simple kick skill into a world-destroying heavenly stomp. He could edit reality itself. However, Damien sighed, his excitement dampening slightly. DP isn't easy to get. According to the system, DP is only awarded for interacting with and changing the original plot. Which means, even if I want to stay safe, I can't avoid the protagonist. I have to mess with the timeline. Sigh. Rubbing his temples tiredly, Damien turned his attention to the most intriguing item on his status panel. Innate ability, contract gem. This was it. the ability that made the original Damien Voss the king of 10,000 monsters, the power that allowed him to command armies of demons single-handedly. In the novel, this ability was so fierce that, without the protagonist's plot armor, the number of people who could defeat Damien at his peak was less than 10. But even this god-tier ability had a fatal weakness, a flaw that kept the original Damien as a minor villain instead of the final boss. "Let's see the fine print," Damien muttered, clicking on the description. Innate ability, contract gem. Description: the user can innate ability, contract gem. Rank SSS potential. Description: a crystallized manifestation of the user's soul. If another individual devours this gem, a soul contract is established. Condition: the target must be completely willing to submit to the user's domination. Effect: the user gains absolute control over the target's life and death. The user can copy the target's innate abilities. The user can share their own power with the target. Note: if the contractor dies, the user retains all copied abilities. Reading the first half of the description, Damien's heart raced. It was the ultimate cheat skill. Absolute control, ability copying. It was enough to build an army of monsters and crush the protagonist. In the original story, when the original Damien unlocked this, he thought he had become a god. He dreamed of using it to save his crumbling family. But Damien's mental voice turned bitter. Just like everything else in this damn book, there's a pit. He glared at the condition line. The target must be completely willing. That single word was a death sentence. Who in this dog-eat-dog world would willingly give up their free will? Who would kneel and offer their life to a stranger? No human would. No dragon would. Even a starving goblin wouldn't trade its freedom for slavery. In the novel, this restriction crippled the original Damien. He spent years trying to find a subordinate, failing every time. It was only after he sold his soul to the Demon King that he gained the demon domination aura, which allowed him to brainwash monsters into accepting the gem. But by then, it was too late. He had already lost his mind to the abyss. He became a mad dog, a tragedy who died screaming at the hands of the protagonist's party. "I won't end up like that," Lin Ye Damien vowed, a chill running down his tiny spine. He looked at his reflection in the translucent blue screen. A cute, chubby baby with silver hair stared back, cheeks puffed out in frustration. Anyone seeing him would want to pinch his cheeks, not bow in fear. "I can't rely on the Demon King, and I can't rely on luck. If the rules of this world say I'm destined to fail, then I'll change the rules." His eyes locked onto the DP, Destiny Points, counter in the corner of his vision. DP 100. It was his only lifeline. The magic system that brought him here wasn't just a status screen, it was an editor. "System," Damien commanded in his mind, focusing his intent like a laser. "How many points to edit the activation condition? I want to remove the willing requirement." Ding. Analysis complete. Removing willing requirement entirely violates the law of causality. Cost, 1 million DP. Damien rolled his eyes. "Figures. Okay, let's compromise. Change the condition. Make it so they don't need to be willing, they just need to offer no physical resistance." It was a loophole. If he could knock someone unconscious, drug them, or beat them until they couldn't move, they would have no physical resistance. Then he could force-feed them the gem. The screen flickered. The text rearranged itself. Proposed edit, condition change. Old, target must be willing. New, target must offer no physical resistance. Cost 100 DP. Damien stared at the cost, 100 DP. It was possible. He felt a surge of excitement. With this edit, he could knock someone unconscious and force the contract. It was the key to his survival. But then, his eyes drifted to his balance. Current DP, 100. He hesitated. This is everything I have, my entire starter fund. His brow furrowed. I'm a baby. I can't go out and farm points for years. If I spend this now, I'll be at zero. What if I get sick? What if an emergency happens and I need a miracle to save myself? The fear of the unknown gripped him. 100 DP was his safety net. Spending it on a skill he couldn't even use yet seemed reckless. No, I should wait. I need to save it for. Grrrbly. A loud, demanding sound erupted from his stomach. The intense mental focus had drained his stamina. His blood sugar crashed. The complex thoughts of a reincarnator were instantly overridden by the primal, overwhelming instinct of an infant. Hunger. Oh no, Damien thought, panic rising. Not now, I'm planning world domination. I don't want to. It was too late. His mouth opened on its own, his lungs filled with air. Wahhhh, wahhhh. The cry tore through the silent nursery, loud and shrill. Damien tried to stop, but his body wouldn't listen. He flailed his chubby limbs, his face turning red with the indignity of it all. Damn this baby body, I'm a grown man inside. Stop crying, stop it. But the tears flowed freely, hot and humiliating. Thump, thump, thump. Hurried footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Madam, the young master is crying again. A panicked voice called out. It's been 3 hours. He must be hungry, or perhaps he needs changing. The door creaked open. Damien's cries hitched for a second. He recognized the footsteps following the maid. They were lighter, more graceful, but hurried. His mother. A complicated knot of emotions tightened in his chest. In his past life on Blue Star, Lin Ye had been an orphan. He grew up in the system, moved from foster home to foster home. He didn't know what a mother's warmth felt like. He didn't know what it was like to have someone run to him just because he cried. But now, every time he made a sound, this woman, this powerful, noble mage, dropped everything to come to him. The concept was alien. It was terrifying. Over the past week, she brought him new feelings he couldn't understand. And as she stepped into the room, her silver hair flowing and her eyes filled with genuine, frantic worry, Damien didn't know if he was crying because he was hungry or because he was overwhelmed. Elizabeth Voss. Matriarch of the House of Voss, a name that carried as much weight in the Dragon Empire as the Emperor himself. She was a symbol of devastating beauty and terrifying power. To the world, she was known by many titles: the Queen of 10,000 Illusions, the Empress of Deceit, the Mistress of the Mist. As a sixth-order mage specializing in illusion and dark magic, she stood at the pinnacle of human achievement. In a room full of generals, her whisper was louder than a shout. Her gaze could make hardened warriors question their own sanity. Her illusions were so potent they could rewrite the memories of entire cities. But right now, the Empress of Deceit was running down a hallway in her silk slippers, her hair a chaotic mess of silver, looking completely panicked. Is he hurt? Is he sick? Did an assassin slip in? Is it a fever? Oh gods, what if he's hungry and the milk is too cold? Her long, silver-white hair fluttered behind her like a banner of war, usually perfectly coiffed but now wild with haste. Her piercing blue eyes, usually cold enough to freeze a man's soul, were wide with frantic maternal worry. Just moments ago, she had been in her private study, deciphering an ancient, forbidden tome to prepare for her breakthrough to the Seventh Order, a feat that would shake the continent and secure her family's dominance for another century. She was analyzing complex spell matrices, calculating mana flow, and managing the intricate finances of the Voss estate. But the moment a young maid burst in, breathless and terrified, to say, "The young master is crying," Elizabeth's world stopped. She had thrown the priceless grimoire onto the floor without a second thought. She didn't even bookmark the page. She hiked up the hem of her elegant purple silk gown and sprinted out the door, leaving a trail of confused servants in her wake. For all her power, for all her prestige, in front of the terrifying, overwhelming concept called motherhood, Elizabeth Voss was completely helpless. It had been a week since she gave birth, a week of emotional whiplash. The joy of holding her son was constantly at war with the paralyzing fear of losing him. With her husband, Thuron, away on a classified mission that even she didn't know the full details of, the weight of protecting their newborn heir fell entirely on her shoulders. Every cry felt like a siren. Every sneeze felt like a crisis. "Madam, he's still crying. It sounds like hunger, or maybe he's cold. Check the temperature. Is the room too cold, too hot?" The maids were fretting outside the nursery door, a flock of nervous birds. Elizabeth ignored them, bursting through the entrance with enough force to rattle the hinges. Following close behind her was a young maid with short, vibrant orange hair and bright green eyes, Isabel. Isabel wasn't just a servant. 8 years ago, Elizabeth had slaughtered a band of slave traders on a whim and found a terrified 10-year-old girl in a cage. Instead of leaving her to the authorities, Elizabeth took the girl in. She raised her, educated her, and trained her in the ways of the Voss family. Now, at 18, Isabel was Elizabeth's shadow, her personal assistant, and the only person in the mansion who could keep up with her mistress's frantic pace. "Calm down, madam," Isabel whispered, placing a steadying hand on Elizabeth's arm. "We are in the safest room in the Empire. The wards are active, the guards are posted, he is fine." Elizabeth took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to compose herself. She smoothed her gown, placed a hand over her racing heart, and stepped into the room. Hallelujah. Damien's POV. Beauty. The moment the door opened, Damien's high-pitched, indignant wailing cut off abruptly. He stared at the woman who entered. Her silver hair cascaded like a waterfall of moonlight, framing a face that seemed sculpted by the gods themselves. Her skin was flawless, glowing with faint magical energy that made the air around her shimmer. Her blue eyes held a depth that felt like drowning in the ocean, terrifying, yet mesmerizing. Even in his past life on Blue Star, having seen countless jade beauties, in novels, movies, and idol groups, Damien had to admit, his new mother was on a different level. She was more than pretty, she was majestic. She carried an aura of authority that demanded attention even when she was just standing there. So this is the Empress of Deceit, Damien thought, awestruck despite his baby brain. In the novel, she tricked an entire enemy army into walking off a cliff with a single illusion spell. She's a legend, and now she's my mom. Before he could ogle her beauty any longer, a pair of strong arms lifted him from the crib. "My lady, look," Isabel giggled, holding Damien up like Simba on Pride Rock. "He stopped crying the moment he saw you. He must have missed you." Isabel looked at the baby with pure adoration. Her green eyes sparkled. To her, Damien wasn't just a baby. He was the son of her savior. The woman who pulled her out of hell had given birth to this child, and Isabel had already sworn a silent, blood oath to protect him with her life. If he needed the moon, she would find a ladder. If he needed a mountain moved, she would bring a shovel. For Isabel, he was an extension of the woman she owed everything to, which meant she owed Damien everything by proxy. Thinking of this, her gaze turned firm as she held him, creating a protective cradle with her arms. Elizabeth smiled, her anxiety melting away instantly at the sight of her son safe and sound. Her lips curled upward in a gentle, radiant smile that would have made emperors kneel. "It's all right, Isabel, but I think he missed his lunch more than his mother. Come here, my little trouble." She walked over and gently took Damien from Isabel's arms before gently untying the strap of her gown. Damien's eyes went wide. "Wait, no, hold on." The realization hit him like a truck. I'm an adult. I was 18. I was about to go to college. I had a life. I can't do this. He looked up at his mother's beautiful face, then at the impending situation. This is humiliating. I refuse. Bobbies shall never be slaves. He tried to protest. He opened his mouth to shout a defiant refusal, to demand a bottle or at least a spoon. No, I have dignity, I have. But the moment the warm milk hit his tongue, his brain turned off. Okay, maybe just a little. The primal instinct of an infant overrode the complex logic of a transmigrator. His body relaxed. His eyelids grew heavy. In an instant, his high-level sucking skills came into play. The warmth of his mother's arms and the rhythmic beating of her heart lulled him into a deep, comfortable darkness. As his consciousness faded, he heard Elizabeth whisper softly, "Sleep well, my little prince. I have a surprise for you when you wake up." She stroked his cheek, her eyes shining with a fierce, protective light that banished the shadows of the room. "You might not believe it, but your father just completed his mission. He's on his way home." Damien drifted off, completely unaware of the bomb she just dropped. If he had been awake, he would have been terrified. Because his father wasn't just any mage. He wasn't just a noble. He was Thuron Voss, the king of darkness, the strongest man in the Dragon Empire, the only half-step Ninth Order mage in the world, the man closest to God. And he was coming home to meet his son. In the vast lands of Elias, humanity was fractured into a mosaic of hundreds of kingdoms. Some were mere hamlets of a few thousand souls, others were sprawling titans housing hundreds of millions. Yet amidst this chaotic sea of nations, three behemoths stood at the apex of the food chain, dictating the fate of the human race. The Dragon Empire, the Lionheart Kingdom, the Viridian Light. Each held hundreds of vassal states under their banners and possessed the ultimate deterrent, beings of the Eighth Order. They were the symbols of human supremacy. However, absolute power did not guarantee absolute peace. To maintain their hegemony, dirty work was required, work that could not see the light of day. In the Dragon Empire, that burden had fallen upon the Voss family for a millennium. They were a lineage of dark mages, masters of death, shadow, decay, illusion, and curses, arts that would be reviled as heretical by the outside world. Yet it was precisely this affinity for the abyss that made them the indispensable shadow of the empire. And at this very moment, the current patriarch of that shadow was at war. Thuron Voss, the man closest to God, one of the few living Eighth Order beings, the physical embodiment of darkness. He stood in the center of a desecrated cathedral. The walls were smeared with blood-drawn sigils of eldritch beasts, and the air reeked of iron and ozone. Surrounding him were over 100 hooded figures, their intent murderous. Thuron, a towering figure at 6'5", threw his head back and laughed. His long gray hair danced in the turbulent air as he looked at his opponents with pure, unadulterated scorn. "Ha, I must be getting old if the dogs of a cult think they can corner me." His laughter died abruptly, replaced by a scowl that dropped the temperature of the room by 10 degrees. "Do you think I've grown frail because I haven't slaughtered anyone in a decade? If not, how dare you demon-worshipping filth step foot in my empire?" Thuron clenched his fist, the leather of his glove creaking. Beneath his arrogance, a volcano of rage was erupting. Angry at the sudden timing, angry that he couldn't be there, angry that he had missed it. Yes, he had missed it. Just as his wife was due to give labor, the Emperor's urgent decree had arrived. Demon worshipper activity detected in the south. Investigate immediately. Duty had called, and because of these bastards, he wasn't there to hold his newborn child. "Obsidian Sea," Thuron roared, his voice shaking the stained glass windows. "Normally, I would capture a few of you for interrogation, but today, I'm not in the mood." He took a step forward. I've decided to kill you all." Boom! Space itself seemed to warp. A terrifying wave of mana exploded from his body, cracking the stone floor beneath his boots and pulverizing the wooden pews nearby. The pressure was so immense that his own silver armor groaned, spiderweb fractures appearing on the pauldrons. The 20 Voss family mages behind him instinctively stepped back. They knew the truth. When the patriarch was angry, he was a natural disaster. With physical strength rivaling an adult dragon and magic to match, intervention was suicide. Thuron raised his hand to wipe them out, but movement in the crowd stopped him. From the sea of black robes, 2 figures dressed in pristine white stepped forward. "Sir King of Darkness, please calm down," the figure on the left spoke, his voice eerie and detached. "You might not know this, but this is the temple of our Lord. If you choose to remain aggressive, we will have no choice but to act." "Indeed," the second white-robed figure added, completely ignoring the mana crushing down on them. "We applaud you for finding this base, King of Darkness, but thanks to the power of our Lord, your struggle is meaningless." The 2 figures turned to face each other, bowed, and chanted in unison. "Praise be to the demon god of void." Like a chilling echo, the 100 cultists behind them fell to their knees. "Praise be to the demon god of void." Thuron's patience snapped. "Voss family, seal the exits. Not a single rat leaves this church alive," Thuron barked. "I'll end this quickly so I can go home and see my son." He didn't wait for a response. He slammed his palms together, channeling a torrential amount of mana. Eighth Order spell, Shadow of 10,000 Armies. The shadows cast by the pillars and the cultists suddenly liquefied. Like a tidal wave of ink, darkness flooded the church floor. From the abyss, hundreds of silhouettes rose, nightmarish soldiers with 4 arms, winged beasts and dragon-shaped horrors. In a split second, the numbers game flipped. Thuron was no longer a numbered, rather he had become the one outnumbering them. "You dare surround me?" Thuron's eyes glowed with blue mana. "If you don't entertain me in battle, I promise you will beg for death long before I grant it." He was ready to tear them limb from limb. Mercy was a concept the Voss family had abandoned centuries ago. But just as he was about to unleash the slaughter, Thuron's pupils dilated. His heart skipped a beat. No, that shouldn't be possible. His gaze locked onto the 2 white-robed figures. Their aura had changed. It wasn't the aura of fodder. "How are both of you 8th Order?" Thuron whispered, his voice laced with genuine shock. The Imperial Seers didn't sense any breakthroughs. The math didn't add up. Across the 3 great empires, with a combined population of over 1 billion citizens, there were only 7 known 8th Order beings. That was less than 0.001% of the human race. And yet, 2 unknown 8th Orders were standing in front of him in a dilapidated church. A cold chill ran down his spine. Instantly, he knew this was a trap, a meticulously planned assassination target at him, the head of the Voss family. Thuron realized with sinking dread that he wouldn't be going home today, perhaps not even tomorrow. "Sigh, I'm sorry, Elizabeth," he whispered, tightening his stance as mana flared around him like a raging inferno. "I'm going to have to delay my return." The 2 white-robed cultists pulled out strings of bone beads, their chanting rising in volume. "For the demon god, die King of Darkness." Spells collided. Light and shadow crashed together, tearing the roof off the church and lighting up the southern sky. To a distant observer, it looked less like a battle and more like the apocalypse. Meanwhile, in the Voss estate, far away from the blood and thunder, the atmosphere was serene. Damien, a newborn wrapped in silk, had just finished being breastfed. His mother, exhausted, had placed him gently in his crib. But while his body was that of an infant, his mind was racing with the anxiety of an adult. He stared at the ceiling, his tiny hands trembling. He had heard the maids whispering. His father was on a sudden mission to the south. Damien's face, usually cute and chubby, turned ashen gray. The timeline, it was matching up perfectly. According to the book, Damien thought, his internal voice frantic. The patriarch of the Voss family was conspired against by the second prince and the Obsidian Sea. He was ambushed on a mission exactly before his first child's birth. Damien recalled the plot summary vividly. It was a pivotal moment in the web novel history. In that battle, Thuron Voss loses an arm. His entire team, including several 6th and 7th Order elders, are slaughtered. It decimates the Voss family's combat power and political standing overnight. The readers had called this event the beginning of the end. It was the first major move the demon worshippers had made in decades, and they nearly took down a pinnacle of humanity in a single strike. Damien looked at his tiny, useless hands. My father is walking into a death trap. Suddenly, the lingering taste of his mother's milk didn't seem so sweet anymore. The downfall of the Voss family wasn't just a tragedy. It was the domino that would topple Damien's entire existence. If he didn't intervene now, the ending was written in stone. Damien's life becomes a living hell. The sentences from the original novel flashed through his mind like a nightmare on loop. Watching his ancestral home crumble from wealth into destitute poverty, becoming the punching bag for every minor noble house looking to score cheap points. And the finale, watching his family dragged to the guillotine, branded as traitors to the empire, executed one by one while the crowd cheered. Damien sucked on his mother's breast with a ferocious intensity, his tiny brow furrowed in frustration. The stress was making him aggressive, his infant instincts clashing with his adult consciousness. Oh, Elizabeth looked down, a gentle smile gracing her lips. She adjusted him gently. My little one seems ravenous today, but why the frown him? She brushed a thumb over his furrowed brow. Is it intuition? Are you worried because you heard your father is coming home? Her voice dropped to a soothing whisper, filled with a terrifyingly misplaced confidence. Don't worry, my love. The Empire may not know the full extent of it, but your father is at the peak of the 8th Order. Unless 2 8th Orders and an army besieged him simultaneously, he is invincible. Elizabeth's eyes shone with adoration as she combed her fingers through Damien's silky white hair. To her, Thuron Voss was a god of war. To Damien, he was a walking death flag. That's exactly the problem, Mother, Damien screamed internally. That is exactly the scenario happening right now. But her words sparked a synapse in his developing brain. Wait, 9th Order. In the lore, the gap between the 8th and 9th Order is the difference between a mortal and a demigod. DP, destiny points, can force breakthroughs. He ignored the maid, Isabella, chattering in the background. He needed to focus. System, calculate the cost. How much DP does it take to force Thuron Voss into the 9th Order right now? Damien stared into the empty air. To anyone else, he was a dazed baby staring at dust motes. To him, the air shimmered as the translucent blue interface materialized. Detecting host request, target, Thuron Voss analysis, insufficient comprehension of world laws, calculation, brute force law injection required. Lines of data cascaded down the screen, reflecting in Damien's beady blue eyes. He didn't understand the esoteric runic scripts flowing past, something about law comprehension being the key to the 9th Order, but he understood the final number that settled on the screen. To force a 9th Order breakthrough, 1 billion DP required. 1 billion. Damien nearly choked on his milk. System, are you kidding me? I'm a baby. Where the hell am I supposed to get 1 billion points? That's not a price tag, that's a rejection letter. He mentally kicked the interface. It remained stoic, a cold, unfeeling tool. Fine, I expected the easy way out to be blocked. He needed a plan B. He racked his memory of the original novel, Thuron Voss, the King of Darkness. He was an absolute powerhouse at the peak of the Eighth Order. In the book, Thuron didn't lose because he was weak. He lost because he was worn down. It was a war of attrition. The readers even debated it for years. In a 1v1, always bet on Thuron Voss. If he couldn't make his father a god, he would make him a monster that refused to die. System, forget the breakthrough. Use all currently available DP. I want to max out Thuron Voss's stamina, mana recovery, and health regeneration. Give him the highest durability buff you can afford. It was a gamble. He didn't know the exchange rate. He didn't know if 100 DP was a drop in the bucket or a tidal wave, but he had no other currency to spend. Confirming request, 100 DP deducted, applying enhancement, status effect applied to Thuron Voss, semi-immortal state, duration, 72 hours. Damien read the text, his heart pounding against his tiny ribs, semi-immortal. He didn't know the limits of that title. Could he survive beheading? Disintegration? Probably not, but it had to be enough. Father, I've never met you. But please, don't let Mother down, don't let us become a tragedy. The mental exertion hit him instantly. The system usage drained his infant brain of glucose and energy. His eyelids felt like they were made of lead. Damn this useless baby body. I need to grow up fast. Oh, Isabel, look, Elizabeth whispered, her voice warm. He's fallen asleep. Darkness took him before he could protest. Location: the Ashen Ruins, border of the Empire Pav, Thuron Voss. While the nursery was warm and scented with milk, Thuron Voss's reality was the metallic stench of iron and the cold bite of wind. He was at the end of his rope. Thuron knelt on one knee, his greatsword acting as a crutch to keep him from collapsing. He was surrounded. Over 50 cultists in black robes formed a suffocating ring around him, while 2 figures in pristine white robes floated above, looking down with arrogant pity. Thuron's once silver hair was matted with crimson. Blood, some his, mostly theirs, dripped from his chin, mixing with the sweat that stung his eyes. His ribs were a jagged mess inside his chest. His mana veins burned as if filled with acid. His arms were numb from blocking 1,000 strikes. He was empty, no stamina, no mana, no hope. The only thing keeping his heart beating was the image of a woman and a child waiting in a warm mansion miles away. I need to go home. He tried to stand, but his legs refused to obey. He was ready to burn his very life force, to detonate his core, just to take these bastards with him. My dear King of Darkness, one of the floating white-robed figures spoke. His voice was melodious, amplified by magic to echo through the ruins. Your fate is sealed. Death is a certainty. The cultist spread his arms wide. However, my lord is one of grace and salvation. His kindness knows no bounds. His wisdom has no end. Thuron grit his teeth, the sound audible in the silence. My dear Thuron, would you like to hear about our Lord and Savior, the demon god of the void, before you perish? The question hung in the air, a mockery of Thuron's struggle. Thuron looked up. His vision was blurry, but his eyes burned with a terrifying blue flame. For these insane fanatics, he had no eloquent speech. He had no negotiation. 2. He spat a glob of bloody phlegm directly at the floating figure. Fuck off, you bastards. And then, just as his vision began to fade, a warmth unlike anything he had ever felt erupted in his chest. Instead of the burning of life force, a second wind roared through his veins. System intervention active TUI. A glob of thick, crimson phlegm hit the dirt. Fuck off, you bastards. Thuron glared, his eyes burning with defiance despite the blood coating his teeth. His voice was a ruined rasp, yet it carried not a shred of surrender. The two figures in white robes didn't flinch. They didn't even look angry. Instead, they looked at Thuron, the man the world called the King of Darkness, with a gaze full of sickening pity. To them, he was merely a brute who couldn't comprehend the majesty of their truth. The white robe on the right shook his head, a sigh escaping his lips. "Quite unfortunate, King of Darkness. I truly harbored hope that you would see the error of your ways." The cultist raised a hand. The gesture was casual, yet the air suddenly grew heavy, smelling of ozone and sulfur. "O gracious Void Lord, you who reign over the deepest layer of the abyss." The chant began as a whisper, but echoed like thunder. "Shine your chaotic light upon this withered world. Your humble followers enact your will. In the name of the Void, I sentence these heretics to extinction." Boom! The atmosphere didn't just tremble, it shattered. The sky tore open, bleeding a sick, violent red. Arcs of black lightning danced across the ground, vaporizing rocks and trees instantly. Around the white robes, weaker cultists and members of the Voss family didn't even have time to scream. They collapsed, foam frothing at their mouths, their eyes rolling back as their souls were crushed under the sheer spiritual weight. Thuron, who had been channeling his mana to recover, fell to one knee. He vomited a mouthful of fresh blood. It felt as though an invisible mountain had been dropped on his shoulders. His organs groaned under the strain. He forced his head up, his pupils constricting to pinpricks. "I am possible. Are you insane?" Thuron roared against the wind. "Summoning a demon god in the material plane. Do you want to kill us all?" Then he saw it. Through the tear in the red sky, a pair of eyes floated in the infinite darkness. They were ancient, indifferent. They contained all the malice of the cosmos, yet when they looked at Thuron, there was no hatred. There was only the playful curiosity of a child about to crush an ant. "I'm going to die." The thought wasn't a guess, it was a certainty. Cold sweat drenched Thuron's back. His bones creaked audibly. His consciousness began to fray at the edges. No mortal mind could withstand the direct gaze of a void demon god. Just as his vision began to fade into black, a thunderous roar shattered the oppressive silence. "Demon god of the void, you dare invade this realm." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "Do you take the gods of Elias for a joke?" Golden light erupted in the distance, clashing against the red sky. The pressure on Thuron vanished instantly as the demon god's gaze shifted toward the new threat. Thuron gasped, greedy for air. "Schlick!" His eyes widened. A cold, sharp pain bloomed in his abdomen. "Eck!" He coughed, blood spraying his boots. Looking down, he saw the tip of a dagger protruding from his stomach, glistening with his own gore. Behind him, the white robe twisted the blade viciously. "You should have paid more attention to us, not the sky," the cultist whispered into Thuron's ear. His voice was calm, mocking. "The affairs of gods are not for mortals like us." Thuron's knees gave out. He collapsed, his vision blurring. "With the gods distracted by my lord, your death will go unnoticed. A quiet end for a loud king." The white robe pulled the dagger out, wiping it on his sleeve. He turned to leave, satisfied. The strongest obstacle in the kingdom was dead. Their plan was perfect. But before a smile could fully form on his face, the air shifted. A heartbeat, loud, rhythmic thump-thump. The white robe froze. On the ground, the gaping wound in Thuron's stomach began to hiss. Steam rose from his flesh, as muscle fibers wove themselves back together at a visible speed. The gash on his head sealed, his pale, deathly skin flushed with a vibrant, unnatural rosiness. Thuron blinked. A moment ago, he was a candle in the wind, flickering out. He had been ready to burn his very soul for one last strike. But now, a foreign energy surged through his meridians. It wasn't just healing him, it was evolving him. He didn't just feel okay, he felt infinite. Thuron slowly rose to his feet. The shadow beneath him began to boil. Ha ha ha! A low chuckle escaped his throat, quickly turning into a manic roar. Eche, amazing. It seems fate hasn't abandoned me yet. The white robes stepped back, horror dawning on their faces. What are you? House Voss' secret art, Thuron whispered, his eyes glowing with purple mana. The midnight domain. V-wum. Sound died, light died. Instantly, a 10-kilometer radius was plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. No sun, no moon, no heat, no cold. Only Thuron. The energy inside him was wild, untamed, and overwhelming. He realized he had been fighting with shackles on his whole life. Now, the shackles were broken. He looked at the trembling cultists, their white robes glowing faintly in the abyss he had created. Thuron tilted his head, a savage grin tearing across his face. "You made a mistake," he said softly, his voice echoing from every direction at once. "You should have gone for the head." Boom! A colossal hand made of pure, condensed shadow erupted from the ground. It slammed into the knife-wielding cultist with the force of a freight train. A move so fast no one could react. The man didn't even have time to scream. He simply exploded into a mist of blood and regret. Thuron cracked his neck, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silence. "Now," he murmured, stepping forward, "let me show you why they call me the king." Thuron's roar shattered the atmosphere. Under the immense pressure of his mana, his veins bulged like serpentine worms beneath his skin, and capillaries burst in a mist of red. Yet, under the influence of his newfound, mysterious immortality, the horrific injuries knitted themselves back together in the blink of an eye. Destruction and regeneration cycled 1,000 times in a single second. At his center, reality warped. Above the heavens and deep into the bedrock, darkness did not just fall, it conquered. House Voss' secret art, midnight domain. Instantly, space spanning hundreds of kilometers was swallowed by an abyssal night. The shadows of the fallen began to writhe. From the ink-black ground they rose, first 10, then hundreds, then thousands. The legion expanded exponentially, until tens of thousands of shadow soldiers stood at attention. Ancient dragons constructed of pure twilight, faceless giants, and nightmare beasts roared toward the invisible sky, paying absolute homage to their liege. Even the 15 surviving members of the Voss family guard found themselves enveloped by this majestic power, their exhaustion washed away by the tide of darkness. Thuron stood at the eye of the storm, dark energy, drifting off his shoulders like volcanic smoke. "Ha, the obsidian sea!" Thuron smirked, his eyes glowing with a violet predatory light. "I can tell this entire setup was a trap from the start, but it doesn't matter." He cracked his neck, the sound echoing like a thunderclap. "Because after I slaughter you too, I'm going to hunt down the coward hiding behind you." Facing 2 eighth-order powerhouses, holding back was not an option. Normally, expanding the midnight domain to this catastrophic scale would have liquefied his organs from mana overload. But Thuron realized he had become a paradox, a bucket that could not overflow, constantly refilled by an external, infinite source. He decided to remind the world what it meant to challenge the man closest to God. The cultists, shrouded in white robes, watched the transformation. Though their aura flickered with shock, their fanaticism held them in place. "Should I admit that you are indeed the monarch of shadows?" The white-robed figure on the right sneered. "It changes nothing," the figure on the left hissed. "Regardless of your struggle, today is your expiration date." They raised their hands in perfect synchronization, their mana flaring with a nauseating, corrupted light. "Void secret technique, abyssal sacrifice." As the chant finished, the black-robed subordinates standing behind them stiffened. Their hands flew to their chests, clawing at their own flesh in absolute terror. "Arg!" Help me, please. Lord Demon God, I don't want to die. Their pleas were silenced by the sound of wet tearing. Blood erupted from every orifice, eyes, ears, and pores, spraying into the air like a macabre fountain. Their veins turned black and burst, their faces frozen in masks of supreme agony. It was a sight so grotesque that even Thuron, a veteran of countless wars, hesitated for a split second. Damn, I've fought you bastards for decades, but your depravity never ceases to amaze me. He knew he couldn't let the ritual complete. Shadow Army, devour them, Thuron commanded, thrusting his palm forward. First-class shadow magic, hand of the Titan. Shadow mana condensed, forming a colossal hand that dwarfed mountains. Unlike his previous attacks, amplified by the Midnight Domain, this palm spanned several kilometers, blotting out what little light remained. Boom! The palm slammed down, the earth screamed. A localized earthquake tore through the region, the shockwave powerful enough to shift the continent's tectonic plates. Across the border, in neighboring empires, ancient monsters and supreme mages turned their gazes toward the battlefield, sensing the disturbance. But as the dust settled, a distorted voice, sounding like 1,000 wailing souls speaking in unison, echoed from beneath the giant shadow palm. Too late, King of Darkness. The shadow hand was torn apart from the inside. A monstrosity rose. Standing a staggering 100 feet tall, its body was a chaotic mass of void slime, studded with blinking, bloodshot eyes. Embedded in its heaving chest were the two faces of the white-robed commanders, stretched and fused into the flesh. The void aberration had descended. Thronvoss, we told you, your grave is here. The voice was a physical force, shattering boulders and trembling the air. Thuron looked up at the eldritch horror. The wind whipped his coat violently, but his expression settled into an eerie calm. Slowly he reached into his pocket, retrieving a crumpled cigar and a silver lighter. Click! The flame lit the tobacco. He took a long, deep drag, exhaling a cloud of smoke that mingled with the shadow aura. Hey, Alfred, Thuron spoke without turning around. Behind him, Alfred, the captain of the Voss Mage Corps and a 7th-order mage, gripped his staff, ready to die. Sir, most of you have followed me for years. You know my limits better than anyone, Thuron said, his voice steady. 5 minutes ago, I was running on fumes. I was done. He looked at his hand, clenching it into a fist. But a strange force entered me. It's healing my body, forcing my soul together, replenishing my mana faster than I can spend it. Thuron grinned, a savage, confident look returning to his face. Maybe a god took pity on me, or maybe it's just luck, but with this power, I have to finish this. Alfred, Thuron barked, his voice softening just a fraction. You know, I really wanted to be there. I wanted to hold my son the moment he entered this world. Sir, Alfred's eyes widened. Duty calls. Perhaps that makes me a bad father. Thuron tossed the cigar aside. The ember sparked as it hit the ground. But tell him this. Thuron's mana exploded, pushing the surrounding soldiers back. This bad father is the strongest man in the world. He didn't give them a chance to argue. Thuron triggered his ultimate taboo technique. House Voss' secret art, 1 man, 10,000 shadows. His skin turned obsidian black. His pupils ignited into blinding purple suns. The massive midnight domain that covered the horizon suddenly collapsed. It didn't fade. It imploded, rushing inward at light speed. Condensing all that atmospheric mana into a single point, Thuron. His shadow expanded, rising 10 meters, 20 meters, 50 meters, until a titanic avatar of pure darkness stood eye level with the void aberration. Obsidian bastards, take this. KBBOOM. Thuron's shadow avatar slammed a fist into the slime monster. The impact was cataclysmic. However, back within the Avatar, Thuron coughed a mouthful of golden blood. His vision blurred violently. Even with the infinite mana, the load on his vessel was too great. If one possessed spirit vision, they would see spiderweb cracks fracturing Thuron's very soul. He was burning the candle at both ends. "I have 24 hours, Thuron calculated coldly, wiping the blood from his chin. 24 hours before my soul breaks under this load. Obviously, this mode was a last resort for him. Without the sudden influx of dimensional points, DP, from his son, he wouldn't have been able to throw a punch, let alone manifest an avatar. But the cracks were still spreading. "Damn mortal, how dare you strike a god's vessel?" The aberration shrieked. A tentacle of slime whipped out, smashing into Thuron's avatar and forcing the giant onto one knee. The impact cratered the ground for miles. Yet from the kneeling shadow, laughter erupted. "Ha, ha, ha. If that ugly thing is the body your god granted you, then your god must be one ugly son of a bitch." Thuron forced the avatar to stand, his grin widening manically. "No wonder you hide under those hoods. You look like shit." He slammed his palms together. Shadow art, abyssal thorns. At his command, the earth betrayed the monster. Spikes of solidified shadow, over 100 meters tall, erupted from the ground, impaling the slime and locking it in place. But Thuron knew this was just the opening move. The Titan of Darkness and the monstrosity of the void locked eyes. The atmosphere screamed as their auras clashed. This battle of titans wasn't ending soon. In fact, it had only just begun. Location: unknown, the world of Elias. In a chamber where light dared not tread, the air was thick with a suffocating darkness. 5 figures sat in a circle, their forms obscured by shifting shadows. The only illumination came from a magical projection hovering in the center, and the 5 pairs of blood-red eyes fixed upon it. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy enough to crush bone. On the projection, a battle raged, or rather a calamity was unfolding. Crack! The sound of stone pulverized to dust echoed in the quiet room. One of the figures had gripped their throne's armrest so tightly it had disintegrated. "Impossible!" The voice trembled, losing its composure entirely. "How can the King of Darkness possess such might?" "The reports are absolute," another voice hissed, laced with panic. "The cultists sacrifice thousands. Their technique summons a 9th-order calamity. Are you telling me the Voss Patriarch has matched that?" "He hasn't just matched it," a third voice shrieked, hysteria creeping in. "Look at the energy fluctuations. He's suppressing it." The atmosphere in the room shattered. 9th Order. It was a realm humanity had relegated to myth, a stage where immortals shed their coil and touched the domain of divinity. To reach the 9th Order was to stand on the precipice of becoming a demigod. "If he ascends," the hysterical voice continued, "our plans, the void, it's all over." "Enough!" A single word cut through the panic like a blade of ice. The temperature in the room plummeted instantly, frost creeping up the dark stone walls. The leader of the 5 leaned forward. His red eyes didn't waver from the projection of Thuron Voss. "Umbra, compose yourself. So what if he touches the threshold of the 9th Order?" the leader said, his voice smooth, terrifyingly calm. "The wheels of fate are already turning. The void demon god has stirred the heavens. Today, humanity's strongest shield will break." "But—" "No buts," the leader interrupted, his killing intent flooding the room. "Even if Thuron Voss were a true demigod, he dies today. The outcome has been calculated by the stars themselves." The other 4 fell silent, cowed by his conviction. With his death, the empire loses its spine. Chaos will reign, and in that chaos we shall move freely. The leader smiled in the dark. In his mind, checkmate had already been called. He had accounted for the armies, the magic towers, and even the intervention of the Holy Church. Damien Voss was a dead man walking. Unfortunately, the leader had made one fatal error. He had calculated everything in this world. But he had not calculated for an anomaly from another world. He had not calculated for Damien. "Watch closely," the leader whispered, his pupils dilating until his eyes were pools of pure blood. "For the Demon King to return, the present world must burn." He raised a gloved hand. "For the Demon King." The fear in the room vanished, replaced by fanatical devotion. "For the Demon King, X4." Unbeknownst to the sleeping world, the countdown to the apocalypse had officially begun. Location: Voss Estate, the nursery. Pav Damien Voss. Chaos was brewing outside, but for Damien, the real prison was these 4 wooden walls. 2 days. It had been 48 hours since the news arrived that the mission squad was nearly wiped out. The Voss estate, usually a beacon of order, was in shambles. Maids were whispering in corners, guards were patrolling with drawn swords, and the heavy scent of medicinal herbs wafted through the halls from where Alfred and the survivors were being treated. But Damien didn't care about the atmosphere. He cared about the numbers floating in front of his eyes. "Damn it, stupid father," Damien grumbled internally, his tiny fists bunching up the silk bedsheets. "Not only are you making mother cry, but do you have any idea how expensive you are?" He glared at the translucent blue screen hovering above his crib. "System active buff. Semi-immortality target, Damien Voss. Time remaining 23:57:31. Less than 24 hours. Damien kicked his legs in frustration. "I spent 100 destiny points, DP, on that buff. That was my entire starter pack. If he dies after the timer runs out, I'm bankrupt and fatherless." He tried to swipe the screen away, but his motor control was still garbage. He hated this body. He hated the drool, the wobbling head, the inability to walk. "System, give me a status update on Thuron." "System notification, insufficient destiny points. Cost 10 DP. "You capitalist vampire," Damien screamed in his mind. He felt his emotions spiraling. It wasn't just the points. The crushing reality of his situation was setting in. If Thuron died, the Voss family would fall. If the family fell, Damien, a useless infant, would be collateral damage. "Is this it?" he thought, his vision blurring. "Is this the reincarnation the gods promised? A front row seat to my own destruction?" Tears welled up in his eyes. Not fake baby tears, but genuine tears of frustration and fear. Suddenly, a shadow loomed over the crib. "Oh, young master." A soft hand wiped his cheek. Damien blinked, focusing on the bright orange hair and emerald-green eyes of Isabel. "Are you hurting, little one?" Isabel cooed, lifting him gently. She pressed his small head against her shoulder, rocking him rhythmically. "You can feel the sadness in the house, can't you? You miss your mummy." Damien didn't fight it. He rested his head on her shoulder. "I'm sorry, young master," Isabel whispered, her voice cracking slightly. "Madam Elizabeth, she isn't doing well. The elders have confined her to her chambers. They say it's to stop her from doing something reckless, but—" She trailed off, hugging him tighter. Damien sighed internally. "Mother is locked up, father is missing, and I am drooling on a maid. Is fate truly unchangeable? Did I come to this world just to be a tragic backstory for some other hero?" The hopelessness was a physical weight in his chest. The timer on the system was ticking down, second by agonizing second. Tick, tick, tick. Suddenly, bang! The nursery door flew open, slamming against the wall with enough force to crack the wood. Isabel jumped, clutching Damien protectively as she spun around. "Who goes there?" A junior maid stood in the doorway, her chest heaving, sweat matting her hair to her forehead. She looked like she had sprinted across the entire estate. Isabel, the maid gasped, her eyes wide and wild. Grab the young master, go get the madam. Isabel stepped back, trembling. What is it? Have the enemies breached the walls? The maid shook her head violently, a mixture of terror and ecstasy on her face. No, it's the patriarch, she screamed. Lord Thuron has returned. Damien's eyes snapped open. Isabel, go get the madam, the patriarch is back. The shout tore through the silence of the estate. Hearing this, Isabel, with little Damien clutched securely in her arms, bolted toward the nearest window. When she looked down at the courtyard, her lower lip began to quiver uncontrollably. Who was her master? Thuron Voss, the world's strongest man, the king of darkness. But looking at the scene below, she struggled to connect those titles to the broken figure she saw. Surrounded by a swarm of family doctors, Thuron was being rushed inward on a stretcher. His condition was nothing short of horrific. 2 broken greatswords were still impaled through his abdomen, and nearly every inch of his skin was swathed in blood-soaked bandages. If she hadn't seen the expression on his face, she would have assumed he was a corpse. But he wasn't dead. Despite the swords, despite the blood loss, despite the sheer carnage etched into his flesh, Thuron Voss was smiling. It was a maniacal, carefree grin, as if he had just returned from a pleasant stroll rather than death's door. Why was he smiling? Perhaps only a madman like him knew the answer. However, the infant in Isabel's arms paid no mind to his half-dead father. Damien's attention was completely hijacked by the translucent blue screen hovering before his eyes. Ever since the messenger arrived, a cascade of mechanical chimes had been battering his mind, leaving him stunned. Ding, detecting deviation from the original plot. Character Thuron Voss, fate has been altered. Character Thuron Voss now possesses an increased probability of breaking through to the Ninth Order. Alert, detected the death of 2 Eighth Order entities. Warning, character Thuron Voss has been marked by the Void Demon God. Warning, multiple gods and demons have taken an interest in the House of Voss. Calculating subsequent butterfly effect. Reading the wall of text, a drop of cold sweat rolled down Damien's chubby neck. That damn crazy old man, what the hell happened in that battle? Damien's thoughts raced, cursing inwardly. Okay, analyze. Thanks to the immortality buff I bought, Dad didn't just survive. He managed to turn the tables and slaughter 2 of his opponents. In an era where the 8th Order is the peak and the 9th Order is a myth, killing 2 equals in a 1v3 scenario is impossible. It defies logic. Damien rubbed his temples, or tried to, with his clumsy baby hands. Truthfully, he was relieved. His father had survived. He had come home to him and his mother. He recalled the original novel's timeline. The anguish on his mother Elizabeth's face, her eventual imprisonment, and the collapse of the Voss family. He had prevented that. But what is the rest of this trash? Marked by the Void Demon God. Multiple gods and demons watching us. I can ignore the Void Demon God for now. That bastard was the mastermind behind the ambush anyway. But being watched by a gallery of other deities, in this wretched world, that is a death sentence. Frustrated, Damien grabbed a fistful of his own baby hair. He racked his brain, trying to recall the lore of the hero returns. In this universe, gods and demons are 2 sides of the same coin. A god might commit genocide for faith points, while a demon might save a village on a whim. The only reason they have different labels is because of the great divine war millennia ago. The victors took the heavens and called themselves gods. The losers were cast into the abyss and branded demons. History is written by the winners, and right now, both sides are staring at my house. Just as his anxiety peaked, a new chime echoed in his mind. Calculation complete. Impact assessment, major plot deviation. Reward 1,000 destiny points, DP. Damien's eyes went wide. 1,000. Haha, so that's how it works. The fear evaporated, replaced by a surge of greed. If I change the major plot points, if I twist the narrative away from the original tragedy, I get paid. And I get paid well. With 1,000 DP, he had not only recovered the cost of the immortality buff but profited tenfold. This was the key. This was how he would survive until the finale. But I need to test the limits. Do minor characters count? Can I edit an event twice? Are there side effects to spamming DP? He forced himself to calm down. Those were questions for later. Right now the reality was grim. Thuron had won, but the Voss family was crippled. The high-end combat power was decimated. The Patriarch was a mummy, and the cosmic entities of the universe were watching them like hawks. Dad has 24 hours left on the immortality buff. That should be enough for him to stabilize. If not, I'll burn more DP to extend it. Damien clenched his tiny fists. More importantly, I can't let this infant body hold me back anymore. I need strength, enough strength to face the challenges rushing toward us. Enough strength that no god, demon, or protagonist dares to look in my direction. In his previous life, the character Damien Voss was destined to become the king of 10,000 monsters, a mid-tier villain meant to be farmed by the hero for experience points. Screw that, Damien thought, his eyes burning with determination. With this system, who cares about being a king of monsters? I'm going to be the king of 10,000 worlds. Ayabaya. He yelled his ambition to the heavens. Or at least he tried to. It came out as an incoherent baby shriek. Before he could attempt a second war cry, a wave of crushing fatigue washed over him. His eyelids felt like lead weights. Damn baby body, Damien mentally groaned, his consciousness fatting. I really can't wait to grow up. Isabelle, noticing the young master's sudden lack of energy, smiled warmly. She gently rocked him, completely unaware that she was holding a transmigrator plotting world domination. Oh, young master, look at you. It's time for your nap, she cooed, planting a soft kiss on his cheek. Don't you worry. I'll take care of the master and madam. They'll be so happy to see you when you wake up. She lowered him gently into his crib, the soft bedding swallowing him up, and quietly stepped out of the room. Location: Voss family estate, the Hall of Ancestral Shadows. While Damien and Isabelle reeled from their respective shocks, a storm was brewing at the very heart of the Voss domain. The family main hall was not merely a room. It was a testament to millennia of accumulation. It was a space so suffocatingly opulent that a lesser noble would have fallen to their knees upon entering, crushed by the sheer weight of history. The floor was paved with abyssal marble, a stone as dark as a frozen midnight lake, veined with silver and pulsating violet traces that seemed to breathe. Above, a chandelier the size of a carriage, forged from celestial gold, cast a ghostly, pale luminescence. It did not illuminate the room so much as it made the shadows dance, reflecting off the portraits of past patriarchs and matriarchs that lined the walls like silent judges. At the head of the hall stood two imposing seats, a golden throne for the patriarch and a slightly smaller, intricate silver throne for the matriarch. Stretching out before them, flanking the royal red carpet, stood 18 bronze thrones, 9 on the left, 9 on the right. These were the seats of the absolute powerhouses of the family. To sit here, one had to be a 7th-order mage at minimum. It was a lineup that could flatten small kingdoms. Today, 18 entities filled those bronze seats. The air was thick enough to crush steel. Bang! A fist slammed onto an armrest, shattering the silence. Damn it! Have we fallen so low that even the sewer rats of the obsidian sea dare to bare their fangs at us? The roar came from the left row. An elder with a face scarred by battle fury stood up. He had only one flesh and blood arm. The other was a swirling vortex of condensed shadow essence. Elder Magnus, the Prince of Black Flame. Do they think the Voss name is a relic? Magnus growled, black smoke pouring from his shadow arm and scorching the floor. If the ancestor were not in seclusion healing, I would advocate for total war. We should burn every one of their bases in the Empire to ash. Beside him, the 8 elders of the Hawk faction nodded grimly. Their mana flared in resonance, a collective desire for blood. Sit down, Magnus. Your flames are consuming your logic. The voice was soft, chilling, and cut through the heat like a blade of ice. From the opposite row, an old man with neatly combed gray hair and a long, meticulously groomed beard spoke. He sat with his hands folded, a faint, terrifyingly calm smile on his face. Elder Crow, head of the Dove faction. We are all enraged, Crow continued, his eyes scanning the room. But rage makes for poor strategy. Consider the facts. The Patriarch's mission was classified. Only 2 parties knew the route, the 18 of us and the Imperial High Command. Crow paused, letting the implication hang in the air like a guillotine. We are bound by the bloodline pact. Betrayal from within this room is impossible. The oath would have liquefied the traitor's heart instantly. That leaves only one variable. Magnus froze, the shadow smoke around his arm stilled. The Empire. Precisely, Crow said, his smile failing to reach his cold eyes. We must consider the possibility that this was not a failure of security, but a purge. The Empire may have decided that the Voss family has outlived its usefulness. A heavy silence descended. The Empire, the entity they had served for centuries, the entity they had bled for. Ungrateful bastards, Magnus whispered, the flames in his eyes shifting from rage to a cold, focused malice. After all the wars we won, after all the territories we conquered for them. The surrounding space began to warp. Darkness misted off Magnus's body, darkening the golden chandelier's light. I say we ready a strike squad, Magnus hissed. We infiltrate the capital. We kill the officials responsible. We send a message that the Voss family is not a dog to be put down. And provoke a war we cannot win, a third elder interjected nervously. Magnus grit his teeth. He knew why they were hesitant. He looked toward the empty space behind the main thrones, where the family's greatest secret lay hidden. Ancestor Thaddeus Rune, the bone sculptor. A ninth-order necromancer, a living calamity who commanded legions of bone dragons and undead giants. 50 years ago, the Voss family was untouchable. But 50 years ago, Thaddeus had reached for the stars. He had tried to slay a living demigod to ascend to godhood. He had failed. His army of millions was ground to dust. He escaped with his life, but the demigod's divinity had festered in his wounds ever since, a holy rot that refused to heal. Without the ancestor at full strength, the Voss family was a tiger with broken teeth. The Empire, with its potential hidden Ninth Orders, was a threat they could no longer ignore. The elders exchanged glances. The Hawk faction wanted blood. The Dove faction wanted caution. The stalemate was suffocating. Boom! The massive double doors at the entrance of the hall didn't just open. They were blasted off their hinges. Splinters of enchanted wood rained down on the expensive marble. You senile old fossils, who gave you the courage to lock me up? A woman stormed into the hall, her aura radiating a terrifying, queenly dominance. Following sheepishly behind her were Thuron, the Patriarch, and young Isabella. Elizabeth Voss had arrived. The heavy, conspiratorial atmosphere of the room shattered instantly. 18 of the most powerful mages in the region flinched simultaneously. They looked at Elder Crow, the man who had suggested confining the matriarch for her own safety, with distinct pity. Crow's calm smile twitched. Elizabeth ignored the elders and spun around, grabbing the patriarch by his collar. "And you, Thuron, how dare you almost die on me?" Her eyes flashed with a mixture of relief and fury. "If you ever pull a stunt like that again, I won't wait for the enemy. I'll kill you myself." Thuron, a man who could level mountains, looked at his wife and offered a weak, terrified smile. Crow cleared his throat, trying to salvage the dignity of the council. "Patriarch, matriarch, you have returned. Please take your seats. The meeting has just begun." Click, click, click. The sharp rhythm of heels against marble echoed through the great hall, cutting through the silence like a metronome counting down to an execution. Elizabeth marched forward, her gaze sweeping over the elders. Just days ago, these old fossils had forcibly confined her. Looking at them now, the urge to strangle them with her bare hands was nearly overwhelming. Intellectually, she knew they had acted for her sake. The incident was a catastrophe that even her husband, the strongest man in the family, had barely survived. For her to go, there would have been nothing short of suicide. But knowing the truth and accepting it were two different things. Elizabeth offered them no face. HMPH. She shot a glare of absolute zero at Elder Crow, snorting coldly as she swept past him toward her seat. Trailing a few steps behind her, Thuron wore a wry, helpless smile. He looked like a man who had crawled out of hell, yet walked as if he were strolling through a garden. His right arm was encased in heavy bandages, wrapped so tightly they resembled a cast. Strange, pulsating runic symbols crawled across the fabric, glowing faintly as they struggled to seal whatever lay beneath. His abdomen was similarly bound. His steps were slow, but carried the unshakable weight of a mountain. "Ha, Elder Crow, Elder Magnus. It warms my heart to see you both as lively as ever," Thuron chuckled, his voice raspy but light. "Don't mind Elizabeth. She's just irritable because she missed me too much." The surrounding elders exchanged awkward, wry smiles. Even with mysterious enemies lurking on all sides and his body broken, their patriarch's charisma remained blinding. "Patriarch, you jest." Elder Crow sighed, stroking his long white beard as he watched Thuron ascend the dais to the throne. "If anything, we are the ones who should be relieved, looking at the state you arrived in. The other elders and I estimated you would be bedridden for another week." Crow narrowed his eyes slightly. "The house doctor mentioned your cellular regeneration was abnormal, but isn't this healing speed a bit too fast?" "Indeed," Elder Magnus chimed in, his voice booming with suppressed rage. "But your health is secondary to the cause. Patriarch, explain to us what happened. We are on the precipice of a decision. Do we wage war on the Empire or not?" Magnus slammed his fist on the table. "I know serving them for generations makes treason a bitter pill to swallow. But if necessary, we must remind them that the shadow of the Voss family is capable of devouring their light." The room fell silent, all eyes, elders and Elizabeth alike, fixed on Thuron. Only he could make this call. This was the decision that would either forge their legacy or extinguish their bloodline. However, to everyone's anticipation, Thuron neither agreed nor disagreed. He sat on the throne, his smile slowly fading. He thought back to the battlefield, the blood, the darkness. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the room shifted. VMMM. An invisible, unstoppable pressure expanded from the throne. Thuron's pupils dilated until his eyes were pitch-black voids. The sclera vanished, replaced by a swirling, chaotic abyss. A hint of ancient, uncontrolled evil leaked into the air. CR crack. Spiderweb fractures raced across the marble floor. The heavy stone walls groaned. A Ming vase in the corner shattered into dust, unable to withstand the sudden density of the mana. The elder's shoulders slumped as if gravity had increased tenfold. It was suffocating, terrifying. Looking at that face, devoid of humanity, It was hard to believe this was the same man who had been laughing seconds ago. "Does he?" Thuron's gaze fell on Elizabeth. She was trembling, her fists clenched white, her head bowed low to hide the pain on her face as she resisted the crushing aura. The sight struck his heart like a dagger. "Damn it, what are you doing? Calm down, Thuron, calm down." He gritted his teeth, fighting the chaotic noise in his mind. His chest heaved, breath hitching as he forced the darkness back. Slowly the black tide receded from his eyes. The pressure vanished. "Sorry, everyone," Thuron gasped, wiping a bead of cold sweat from his forehead. "Ha, it seems my situation is a bit trickier than I thought." He raised his sealed right arm, pointing the bandaged limb at the stunned assembly. "Before I tell you about the war, you need to understand one thing. That pressure just now, that wasn't me." The room was deadly silent. "As I was retreating from the battlefield, that bastard, the void demon god, used his followers to try and infect my body." Thuron spoke casually, as if discussing a bad weather forecast rather than a cosmic horror. "I managed to seal the entry point on my hand before it spread fully, but the seal isn't perfect." He frowned, inspecting the glowing runes on his bandages. "If my emotions fluctuate even a little, the void immediately tries to erode my rationality." "As expected of a demon god," he mused, a dark admiration in his tone. "Even without descending, his means are beyond what mortals like us can predict. I'm sure even chopping this arm off wouldn't stop the spread now, so I have to live with it." Thuron leaned back, letting out a long sigh. Funny, isn't it? The world's strongest man, forced into a corner like a frightened dog. I hope the gods in heaven at least kicked that bastard's ass for me." "Thuron." Elizabeth slammed her hands on the table, unable to sit still any longer. "What gods, what seal, what the hell happened on that battlefield?" Her eyes were wide, pupils trembling. "Gods, demon gods, infection." In this land, divine beings were myths, concepts impossible for humans to interfere with. Yet her husband spoke of encountering one, as if he'd run into an old acquaintance at a tavern. The more she heard, the more she realized that his survival wasn't skill. It was a miracle. She looked deep into his eyes, desperate for the truth. Even the hawkish elder Magnus fell silent. He realized this wasn't as simple as political revenge against the Empire. They were stepping into a realm of monsters. Thuron saw the fear and confusion. He knew he couldn't hide it anymore. He waved his good hand. Mana surged, coating the walls in an inky, impenetrable film. Voss' secret art, silent room. Sensing that the barrier was secure, and no spies could pry into their conversation, Thuron's expression turned solemn. "All right, where do I start?" He tapped his chin, looking at the ceiling. "Do I start with the ambush by the 2 Eighth Order Knights?" He looked back at them, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Or should I start with the moment I became immortal?" The meeting concluded, and the days bled into weeks. The Empire held its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The Voss family was known for its blood and iron. Retaliation was not a possibility, it was an inevitability. Yet silence reigned. To the shock of the aristocracy, the Voss family did not lash out. Instead, they recoiled. Like a beast retracting its claws to hibernate, every external force, every merchant caravan, and every detached battalion under the Voss banner was recalled to the main estate. The sudden vacuum left the other major powers on edge. Paranoia spread like a plague. What are they planning? Why are they quiet? High atop the royal palace, the second prince, the man who had orchestrated the mission that nearly claimed Thuron Voss, stood by a window, swirling wine in a glass. He had a vague suspicion of the cause, but he remained tight-lipped, his eyes narrowing at the distant horizon. In the eyes of the common folk, the once tyrannical Voss family simply faded into legend. 1 year turned into 2, 2 turned into 5. Before the Empire realized it, 12 years had vanished into the currents of history. Yeah. Whoosh. The sharp sound of wood cleaving air echoed through an empty courtyard. 151. 152. Sweat dripped from the tip of a nose, crashing onto the stone pavement. Damien stood in the center of the training grounds. He was no longer the infant who had been swaddled in silk, but a young man on the cusp of adolescence. At 12 years old, he stood at an impressive 5'8", towering over peers his age. His waist-length silver hair was pulled back into a high, utilitarian ponytail, revealing a sharp jawline and sea-blue eyes that shone with the hardness of a diamond. His torso was bare, revealing a lean, corded musculature carved by years of discipline, a physique that would put seasoned warriors to shame. 154. His chest heaved, his lungs burned, yet his control remained absolute. Inhale. The ambient mana in the air swirled, drawn into his pores by the rhythm of his breathing. He felt the earth beneath his bare feet, the subtle vibrations of life, the flow of energy. Exhale. 155. Damien froze mid-swing, the wooden sword trembling in his grip. His muscles screamed in protest, reaching their absolute limit. He held the pose for a second longer, letting the burn settle into his bones before lowering the blade. He collapsed onto a nearby stone bench, wiping his forehead with a rough towel. The old breathing techniques from the lore book still hold up. He took a swig of water, his gaze drifting to the high walls of the family estate. If I hadn't retained the combat memories from the original novel, I would have begged to leave this gilded cage years ago. His mind wandered back over the last decade. The timeline had shattered completely. In the original story, his father, Thuron, returned from the ambush half-crippled and consumed by rage. He had launched a suicidal crusade against the cults and the Second Prince's factions, branding the Voss family as traitors and leading to their eventual extermination. But this reality was different. His parents had retreated into seclusion. His mother, Elizabeth, was on the verge of the Seventh Order. Thuron was secluded in the Forbidden Grounds, attempting to breach the legendary Ninth Order. Even the 4 great elders, led by Magnus, had vanished into the shadows on secret missions. "Dad is about to break through to the Ninth Order," Damien muttered, tapping his fingers against the wooden sword. That alone should be worth a fortune in destiny points, but the system only gave me 500. He frowned. Is the void mark on his arm suppressing the reward, or is the system waiting for the breakthrough to be official? Curiosity piqued, he narrowed his eyes. System, how much DP to remove the void mark from Thuron Voss? He asked with a hint of sarcasm, expecting the worst. A translucent blue screen shimmered into existence before him. Target analysis, Thuron Voss. Condition, void mark active. Trace detected, abyssal energy/demon lord signature. Complexity, multiple laws interwoven. Purification cost, 5 million DP. Damien rolled his eyes so hard it hurt. 5 million, of course. He checked his own balance, 1,500 DP. I'm broke, he sighed, dismissing the window. But this stagnation won't last. The timeline is about to kick into gear. He stood up, packing the courtyard as he recited the timeline of doom he had memorized from his past life. This is the year. In the north, the human coalition launches the crusade to capture elven slaves, igniting the racial war. In the south, the dwarves crack the code on ancient rune tech, beginning the age of mechanical guardians. In the west, a random adventurer stumbles upon a dragon's nest, sparking the gold rush that leads to the awakening of the dragon monarch. And in the holy city, Damien's voice dropped to a whisper. The goddess of light descends to deliver the oracle. The demon Lord Azazel will return. He looked down at his hands. They were calloused strong. Year 2025 of the dragon calendar, the year the protagonist is born. A chill ran down his spine. The clock had officially started. In the original novel, Damien Voss was a cannon fodder villain who died miserably at age 37, a puppet of the demons. I have 25 years before the world ends, he thought, his grip tightening on the wooden sword until it creaked. I can't waste another second rotting in this house. The original protagonists, the heroines, the future villains, most weren't even born yet. There was no point in searching for them now. My best window of opportunity is in 16 years, Damien calculated. The Empire's Academy of Knights in Magic, that's the convergence point. That's where the main cast gathers. Plan 1. Accumulate DP by interfering in pre-plot events. 2. Reach a level of strength where I can ignore the family's restrictions. 3. Enter the academy, not as a student but as an instructor. He was deep in thought, plotting the trajectory of the next decade, when a familiar, bright voice pierced his concentration. Young master, good news. Damien blinked, the cold calculation vanishing from his eyes as he turned. Isabel burst into the courtyard, her skirts fluttering. 12 years had treated her kindly. Likely due to her mana affinity, she hadn't aged a day. Her orange hair was as vibrant as a sunset, and her green eyes sparkled with excitement. She was no longer just a servant, but his appointed personal maid and confidant. She skidded to a halt, beaming. "The master has approved your request," she announced, struggling to catch her breath. "You have permission to travel to the Elf Empire, under the condition that you take the Shadow Guards with you." Damien's lips curled into a smile. The first step of the plan was a go. "Finally," he whispered, tossing the wooden sword aside, "it's time to go hunting. Young master, the master approved. You can go to the Elf Empire as long as enough guards follow you." Isabel trotted into the courtyard, her voice ringing out like a bell. Her face was flushed a deep crimson, a mix of exertion and sheer disbelief. She couldn't believe it. Her young master's outrageous request had actually been granted. In these troubled times, why would the master allow him to leave the safety of the castle? The dark rumors whispered by the other maids in the laundry room flashed through her mind, tales of gathering armies and shifting borders. Isabel felt a knot of uneasiness tighten in her stomach, but she quickly shook her head, forcing the thought away. "Haha, I'm probably just overthinking things. The master is wise. He wouldn't endanger the young master." She clutched the hem of her black and white maid uniform, lifting the frills to avoid tripping over them. Her movements were somewhat clumsy, lacking the grace of a trained martial artist, but filled with an earnest energy. "The master said, when you're done with your training, you should meet him in his study," she managed to say, struggling to catch her breath as she finally reached him. "He says you need to have one more father-son talk before you leave. Running all over this mansion really isn't easy." Just as her legs threatened to give out, a warm, calloused hand extended toward her, offering a bottle of water. Damien stood there shirtless, a gray towel slung casually over his shoulder. Sweat glistened on his defined muscles, steam practically rising from his body in the cool morning air. He had just set down his training sword, and he looked at the panting maid with a wry, affectionate smile. He scrutinized her for a moment. It was a mystery how someone so physically fragile had ended up working for the Voss family. In this household, even the lowest kitchen hand was at least a third-order warrior. Yet, looking at Isabel, Damien couldn't sense a shred of mana or aura. She was a regular person through and through. "It doesn't bother me, of course. Loyalty is harder to find than strength." However, his gaze turned serious for a split second. But this world is about to get dangerous. If she's going to stay by my side, I need to do something about her fragility. Drink, Damien said softly. You look like you're about to collapse. As she drank greedily, Damien watched her with warm eyes. In both his past life and this one, she was one of the few people who treated him with genuine care, not just deference to his status. Since Dad agreed to the trip, I can kill two birds with one stone. I'll make a few stops along the way to help her awaken. His eyes drifted to his own hand, his mind touching upon a secret he had guarded for 12 years. The contract gem. It was his innate ability, a cheat enhanced with his transmigration. He hadn't dared to use it yet. The Voss estate was currently under the watchful gaze of too many entities, gods, demon gods, and prying eyes in the shadows. To avoid exposure, he had played the role of the dutiful genius, practicing only standard magic and swordsmanship. Speaking of which, I remember how angry Dad got when I told him I wanted to practice both paths. He recalled the memory from 6 years ago, the veins bulging on his father's forehead, his mother's nervous, snickering smile to break the tension. You fool, not only will it slow your progress, but it's impossible. Even if you reach the third order in both, the moment you attempt the fourth order, your mana core and aura heart will reject each other. You'll explode. Damien inwardly apologized to his father. The old man was only looking out for him based on the common sense of this world. But Damien knew something Thuron Voss did not. The secret tomb of the Mad King, a tear from the goddess of life, the sap of the world tree. In the original novel, the protagonist's group had discovered ancient treasures that allowed for the perfect fusion of mana and aura. If I want to survive the tragedy that's coming for this family, I can't just be strong. I have to be the strongest. He clenched his fist, veins protruding slightly as he felt the power humming beneath his skin. He was already a third-order mage and a third-order warrior. He was at the absolute limit. If he tried to break through now, without those items, he would indeed explode. Is this talent another benefit of transmigration, or was the original Damien Voss just this gifted? 12 years old, Tier 3 on both paths. Even his father, currently hailed as the world's strongest man, didn't become a third-tier mage until he was 18, 6 years older than Damien was now. If the original downfall of the Voss family hadn't happened, the original Damien might have been the protagonist's greatest ally, or his worst nightmare. Damien shook his head, dispelling the thought. Knowing the bastard author who wrote this story, Damien would have likely been given a tragic backstory just to fuel the plot. The author loved making villains suffer. Hatilda, thank you, young master. I'm okay now. Isabel stood up straight, wiping her mouth with a handkerchief. A bright, unblemished smile lit up her face. Even though she was exhausted, the mere act of serving him seemed to bring her joy. Damien smiled wryly. Where else would I find someone so happy just to hand me a towel? He pulled his shirt on, hiding the lean muscle that betrayed his intense training, and swung his sword over his shoulder. "Haha, all right then, let's go." Damien's eyes sharpened. "I wonder what the old man has to say." "Wait for me, young master." As he walked toward the study, Damien's internal monologue turned cold. "Father and son talk, huh? Let's hope he doesn't try to stop me at the last second." POV, Thuron Voss. The study was dim, lit only by the glowing magic stones embedded in the walls. Thuron sat behind a massive desk made of ironwood. His gray eyes were deeper than ever, swirling with a complexity that matched the chaotic times. His black hair, reminiscent of a starry night sky, fell over his forehead as he frowned at the pile of documents before him. He held a pen in his left hand. His gaze slowly drifted to his right arm. It sat motionless on the armrest, wrapped in heavy bandages and inscribed with glowing runes. It had been sealed since the great battle 12 years ago. Neither he nor Elizabeth had been able to break through the curse in over a decade. However, adversity had a way of tempering steel. Though their realms hadn't advanced, their auras were significantly denser, more terrifying than before. "Honey," Thuron's voice was gravelly, breaking the silence. "What do you think about me allowing Damien and Isabel to leave the territory?" He sighed, tossing the pen onto the desk. "Although that kid has always been smarter than his peers, I'm terrified something will go wrong." He tapped a document bearing a royal seal. "Judging from the intelligence reports, it seems that Bastard, the second prince, is finally about to make his move." Elizabeth was sitting on a velvet sofa nearby, casually sipping a cup of herbal tea. To an outsider, she looked the picture of elegance and calm. But Thuron knew better. He watched her right foot tapping rhythmically, incessantly against the floorboards. Tap, tap, tap. She was anxious. "We don't have a choice, Thuron," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the steam rising from her cup. "If we want to keep him out of the storm that is about to swallow this house, we have to send him away, now." Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story, and if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down.